Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. So it's been a while. I'm trying to switch it up and do videos weekly, on a weekly basis. You can expect videos around Saturdays or Sundays, depending on how well I'm going to keep up with this with my New Year resolution. But just to keep the ball rolling, I'm starting this December, this video, to wrap up all the books that I've read. And these are just going to be the top 10. So there's some cheats, there are some series that I count as one book, and the rules are basically these are all my opinion, what I like, books I enjoy, so not based on like New York Times reviews or anything like that. I'm trying to be as honest to myself and to you guys about why I love these books so much. So in order from the least to my favorite, these are all the top 10s that I highly recommend that you read in 2025 and to add to your reading list if you haven't read it already. So without further ado, let's get started with book number 1. So book number 1, this is The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. So it's been a while since I read this. It was near the beginning of the year. So what I loved most about this book is if you like Pride and Prejudice, this kind of follows that theme of societal restraints, romance, that, you know, and sacrifices you have to make. And it's a bit more feminist compared to Pride and Prejudice. Yeah, I believe 1870s in New York. And it's on, there's a young lawyer. He's proposed to this woman named May Wayland. So this is her. And everything seems perfect. She seems like perfect partner and all seems well until the Countess comes to visit her cousin in New York, and things start to fall apart. He starts to fall in love with her. Her character, she's a much more stronger woman. She has a lot more opinions about things, and because of the societal boundaries, they can't be together, and it's very nerve-wracking trying to see them sort out there. The only thing is, it is kind of hard to read at first. Like, yeah, there's a lot of details, a lot of dialogue. It takes some time to get into, but once you understand the story and you're wrapped up in the actual narrative, then it gets really interesting. So yeah, I highly recommend this book if you're looking for a classic and you like stories such as Pride and Prejudice. Okay, so next on the list I have CapCut. So I'm putting this whole series into as one book because I didn't want to hold all 5, but technically this series, I honestly blew through it. It was such a thrilling read. I read it in, I think, less than a week, the full 5 books. And what I loved about it is just that. It's a page turner. You can't stop. It follows this character, Fair, or Fire. Please correct me, all you CapCut fans, because yeah, I haven't been listening to the right pronunciation, but she is basically entangled with the Fae world after accidentally killing one of their members, and from there it goes through romance, goes through political challenges between the different realms and how they fight against the greater evil, as you could say. It's honestly, I know I'm not selling it that well, but it was such a thrilling read. Like, there's so many different world building, like it's beautiful and very sexy. It's a very hot read. So, you know, if you're reading this on the beach, don't expect like it's gonna be PG. It's pretty, yeah, intense, but I'm sure you've heard enough about this. This is an amazing series and loved it. So at number 8, we have White Teeth by Zadie Smith, and I did not expect for it to be as good as it was. I got this secondhand, and yeah, like I was chuckling to myself, and I usually don't chuckle out loud as much as I did reading this. So this story follows 2 families, the Iqbals and the Joneses, and it's set in London, and it goes through, it's like a period piece. It goes through all the different generations of these 2 families and how they deal with immigration, assimilation, identity crisis. There's a lot of funny ways of how you can see as the generations get older, they deal with racism differently, and yeah, just how they decide to identify themselves in London. And it's a very sweet story, especially on the friendships between the two fathers of the two families. That's how it starts. And it was very dear to my heart. It was very fun read. And Zadie Smith, the way she writes, it's very smart and very compelling. So it's not as talked about, but I do highly recommend reading this, and I hope to read more of her in 2024. Okay, coming in next. So this book at number 7 is less on the humor side, and it's a bit more serious, and at some points a little bit hard to read. And that is American Dirt by Janine Cummins. And I also sped through this book. It was beautifully written, and the story was tragic but very important. And it's basically focusing on this mom and her son. The mom's name is Lydia and her son is Luca, and they're fleeing from a cartel violence in Mexico, specifically Acapulco. And how they do that is they have to take illegal trains to try to flee and live the American dream, as you can say. So as undocumented immigrants, they have to live with a lot of danger, a lot of fear of rape, of like trauma, and they have to go through their biggest fears that seems just so out of this world for us, just to live a normal life, as you can say. So yeah, it just, I think it gives a different perspective on migrants and what they have to do in order to just be seen as human. And yeah, I think it's an important story, and highly recommend this. Coming in at number 6, I believe, this is Invisible Child by Andrea Elliott. So I was actually gifted this book from a friend's mom, and I was so glad she did, because again, I could not stop reading it. It's written from the perspective of a journalist. So she's been following this family for the span of 8 years. So this is based on a true story. And Andrea, the journalist, she follows the life of Dasani. So it's this girl who's named after the, as you guessed it, the water bottle brand, because her family was living, they're basically homeless, living below poverty in New York City, and they just have to try to break through the system, how the system works against them to keep them poor, and how this girl basically has to choose between her family and becoming educated and living in the average amongst everyone else. So it's crazy that it's a true story, and I think it gives, again, voices to those who are marginalized, and it's a very important read. You can't put this book down. It's just a page turner, and I really hope that, yeah, we can continue to follow the story of Dasani and where she is now, what she's doing. Coming in at number 5, so back to fiction. This next book I think is raved about a lot, but not as much as some other series, and it is Babel by R.F. Kuang. So I was reading this, I think, beginning of the year, so it's still not that fresh in my mind, but with everything that's happening in the world right now, I think this is such a valuable read to understand the perspective of different people and why things turn out the way they did, and why it's so hard to, even though you share the same values, how you execute can be very different. I'm trying to be as broad as possible, so I'm not spoiling the book. Let me just explain the synopsis. So basically it's dark academia fantasy setting, and it's set in 19th century Oxford, and Babel is this tower here in Oxford where students who have a strong linguistic background can form new languages, and with that, power. So it follows the main character, who is Robin Swift. He's a Chinese orphan who was adopted by a translator in Babel, and he, as he continues to learn, he realizes how he wants to join a rebellion to fight against the institution that he was raised in, because of how much it works against where he was raised. And yeah, so it kind of mixes a lot on politics, even though it's still fiction and a fantasy with all the magic spells and all this. Again, I couldn't stop reading this. It was very beautifully written. At some point, I find it difficult to follow characters who are very hard-headed, but you try to sympathize with them. Anyways, the character can be annoying, but I love this book. The next book, now into the top 4. I read this the first time in 2021, and I reread it, and I think each time you read it, you learn a bit, or you open your mind to something else from the book. So yeah, I don't think you have to read it chapter by chapter, but it is a very beautiful image as a whole. So this book, it's Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. So basically, she's a scientist and she's a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. So a lot of the book is about indigenous teachings and how we basically need to give thanks to our roots. And starting with the story of the Sky Women. If you don't know about this, it's a very interesting story about how the earth came to be, how Sky Women gave birth to the earth that we have, based on the help of all the animals of the world, and how we are no better than all that is given to us. And it basically tries to connect us back to the world, and because there's so much disconnect with all our technology and our cars, how we move, that sometimes you just have to remember that all the little things that keep us alive and that we take for granted, such as the dirt that we walk on, the trees that give us oxygen, even the meals that we have, where the vegetables come from. And it's, yeah, I think it helps us reconnect more with nature, and that we need to stop exploiting the world that we live in and need to start taking care of it. And yeah, it's kind of scary with the way, but it's a way the world is working right now, but it's a very positive look at nature and all that. So yeah, I think this will always be in my top 10s every single year, but I'm just going to put it in for this year. And I think it's one of those you have to reread for the rest of your life. It's beautiful. To my top 3. So again, the trend of journalism and dismantling the system, this next book is no different. It's called Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow. So he is also a journalist, based, I think he used to be New York Times, but then he switched. And he's the big journalist who basically investigated Harvey Weinstein and almost got murdered for doing it. And it reads almost like a thriller, like a real life thriller of these people trying to stop him from revealing how dark and how gross the Hollywood is, and how they can suppress stories of women who experience sexual assault, and even these women are afraid to share their stories. So it's crazy good. It's yeah, if you like thriller but you want to take it up a notch and make it real life, this is the book for you. All right, into my top 2. So these books are books that I can't stop talking about to my friends because it applies to so many things that we absorb in media, in the world, in everyday conversations. My second choice is An Immense World by Ed Yong. I think this should be on everyone's bookshelf. I love it. I love this book to death. I think when I was a kid, I used to have National Geographic stacked underneath my bed. I would flip through it. I would cut out fun facts I learned about animals, and this book is just a more grown-up version of my love when I was a kid. So basically, Ed Yong covers all the different sensories of animals that is beyond what we can comprehend, and how we need to be so careful not to generalize different emotions to perceive how animals perceive the world. So it goes through like things like how bats use echolocation, about how skin, how we feel, can also be a way to breathe, for example, and even Umwelt, which is a German word for basically unique sensory bubbles, how they all shape different animals' behavior. And yeah, I think it's just very humbling to know that we are not the only animal in this world, and that there's so many wonders with all the different animals, how they hurt, how they feel, how they think, how they live. It's such a valuable book, and every time you pick this up, you learn something new, just like any of the other books. But wow, this is just a way for us to also continue to think about our impact on the world. Now we're in the final countdown. This is my #1 favorite book of the year that I just talk about non-stop, and it is also now a TV show, and that book is Dopesick by Beth Macy. So ignore this. My sister's dog kind of ate my book. I know it sounds like a scam, but actually he ate my book. So yeah, I was able to rescue it and it didn't damage the actual reading, so this is how it looks. But anyways, back to business. So what this book is on, she is also a journalist, I believe, and she goes in depth about the opioid crisis, where it started, how it grew, tracing its roots, and how most of it leads back to pharmaceutical companies and how they basically push people into this dope sick behavior, and how we become so reliant on drugs for so many things, no matter what our background is. Being addicted to drugs does not limit to a certain type of character. It can affect families from all kinds of backgrounds, whether you're poor, rich, small family, stable family, doesn't matter. This is how the system keeps you, basically, to fail. And yeah, I guess it humanizes people that you see on the street that are dope sick or suffering from drug abuse, and talk about, like, don't blame them for their behavior, but blame the bigger picture, which is the pharmaceutical industry and its role on having this addiction impact the whole world, basically. And yeah, I think it's an important call to the way we consume things. Even like after reading this and reading other fiction books, I think even all these fiction, like, drugs is normalized so often and glamorized in a way where, yeah, like, just one hit doesn't hurt you. But yeah, I think I have to reread it again at some point, because I've only gone through this once and it's already, whoa, mind-blowing. Yep. So that's my #1 book for this year, and that's my full top 10. So I don't want to do any honorable mentions because I want to try to reread some things to see if it's worth putting into my 2025 list. But overall, I'm really happy with this list. I hope you will enjoy it, since they're not as popular as some other books might be, and I want to give light to them and hope that you will read them and love them as much as I have. What are your favorite 2024 reads? Please share them. I would love to know. And yeah, with that, I'll see you guys next time. Oh, and of course, please don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and support me. I'd really appreciate it. And thankful for you guys, and hope to make more videos in the new year. Let me know if you have any suggestions on what you want to watch next.